Atlanta, home of trap beats, peach cobbler, and reality TV scandals so messy they make Hollywood look like Sunday school. But trust me, nothing prepared us for this plot twist. Picture this, the flashy Frost family, the so-called royalty of love and hip-hop Atlanta, suddenly dragged out of the VH1 spotlight and shoved straight into the harsh glow of a police mugshot. Yep, you heard me right. Their golden boy, their heir to the Frost Chaos Empire, has just been arrested in connection to the death of rapper T-Hood. Arrested. Not trending, not rumored, not allegedly spotted in the vicinity. We're talking handcuffs, fingerprints, the whole Law and Order special. So the question is, was this the ultimate act of family loyalty gone wrong? Or just another spoiled celebrity kid thinking he's untouchable? Did the Frost brand, built on messy cheating scandals and boutique hashtags, finally implode under the weight of its own drama? And here's the kicker, are we about to witness the juiciest crossover episode between reality TV and real-life courtroom chaos that Atlanta has ever seen? Buckle up, because tonight we're tearing the Frost family facade to shreds. Atlanta is a city that thrives on lights, music and drama, but this time the drama has crossed over from the safe world of reality television into something far darker and far more destructive, because at the center of the latest scandal is none other than Kirk and Rasheeda Frost, the couple who built their empire on messy television plotlines, boutique businesses, and Instagram aesthetics. Yet all of that has crumbled into a nightmare after their son Kai Frost was arrested in connection with the death of rapper T-Hood. And the shocking reality is that this is not just a rumor whispered on blogs or a headline twisted for clicks. This is a full-blown scandal where police reports, handcuffs, and mugshots replaced the cameras, stylists, and scripted confessionals that once protected the Frost brand. The family who once thrived on making dysfunction look glamorous has now found itself facing the kind of dysfunction that nobody can spin into entertainment, and the entire city of Atlanta is left gasping for answers about how a family so famous for surviving scandal after scandal finally stumbled into one that could destroy them completely. To understand why this story has gripped everyone so tightly, you have to look at the history of the Frosts. Kirk has long been known as Atlanta's poster child for bad decisions, turning infidelity into a storyline so often that fans half expected him to trademark the term side chick, while Rasheeda, the self-proclaimed boss chick, built her reputation on boutiques, hustle, and social media branding that made dysfunction look like empire building. Together, they carved out a place in reality TV history by showing just enough chaos to keep the audience hooked while always managing to bounce back, looking like survivors of their own mess. Yet the truth, whispered for years, was that the Frost household was less empire and more battlefield, where parenting took a backseat to branding and where loyalty was measured in hashtags, likes, and camera time. Kai Frost grew up in the middle of this circus, constantly under the shadow of the spotlight, never fully free to make mistakes without them being magnified, and never fully able to live outside the narrative his parents had created for themselves. On the night that changed everything, Atlanta was its usual humid, restless self, but inside the Frost circle the tension boiled over. Reports from neighbors say the shouting was so loud it spilled into the street, and insiders claim the clash began between Kai's half-sister Kelsey and rapper T-Hood, who had been circling the Frost orbit for weeks, fueled by rumors of jealousy, money disputes, and personal grudges. It was the kind of argument that reality shows dream of, but there were no cameras, no producers, and no safe way to turn it into ratings. Witnesses say voices escalated, tempers snapped, and what began as words quickly spiraled into violence. Kelsey was left visibly shaken with injuries that even the most loyal Frost supporter could not pretend away, and it was in this chaos that Kai entered the scene, walking straight into the storm, seeing his sister hurt, seeing T-Hood still in the house, and making the decision that would change his life and his family's legacy forever. What happened next is now tangled in contradictions and speculation. Kai insists it was self-defense, claiming T-Hood was a threat and that he acted only to protect his sister, but the mystery deepened when police reports revealed that no weapon was found on T-Hood at the scene, no gun, no knife, nothing. Just questions and the kind of silence that makes gossip roar louder than facts. Some witnesses swear they saw T-Hood holding a gun, others swear he was unarmed, and social media exploded into chaos. Hashtags calling for justice for T-Hood trended alongside hashtags demanding freedom for Kai Frost. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok all became digital battlegrounds where fans clashed like soldiers, each convinced their version of the truth was the only truth. By the end of the night, Kai's mugshot was splashed across feeds, his name dragged into every corner of the internet, while his parents, the masters of public clapbacks and social media survival strategies, went silent. Rasheeda, who just days earlier had been promoting her boutique and posting carefully staged pictures, vanished from Instagram, her comments flooded with outrage and questions about how this could happen under her roof. Kirk, long criticized as the reckless patriarch, faced a new wave of fury, accused not just of cheating scandals but of raising his son wrong, of putting fame over family, of building a brand while his household burned. The criticism was merciless, and it exposed the ugly truth that once a scandal leaves the safety of television producers and moves into courtrooms, there is no editing, no retakes, no witty responses, just the brutal glare of judgment, both legal and public. And yet even in this moment of collapse, the story was far from straightforward. Because as the Frost family faced the wreckage, rumors of missing evidence, conspiracies about a weapon that was supposedly removed before police arrived, and whispers of deeper rivalries in Atlanta's music scene, all began to swirl like smoke around a fire that refused to die. The more people speculated, the bigger the story grew. Bloggers accused the Frosts of using their influence to protect Kai. Fans of T. Hood flooded memorials with demands for justice, while loyalists to the Frost name argued that Kai was being scapegoated because of who his parents were and not because of what he had actually done. And caught between all of this was the uncomfortable truth that nobody could deny: a young rapper was dead, a family was shattered, and the Frost legacy was being rewritten before our eyes, not by VH1 producers but by court documents, police records, and the endless chatter of a city that never forgets its scandals. Kai, for his part, stayed on the scene after the shooting. He handed his weapon directly to police and repeated his claim of self-defense, and while that cooperation earned him some sympathy, it did little to calm the storm of contradictions that continued to unravel. Witness statements clashed, timelines refused to line up, and the missing weapon, or lack of one, became the haunting shadow that no one could ignore in a city built on music, money, and gossip. The Frost scandal had become the #1 topic in studios, barbershops, clubs, and blogs across Atlanta. This was no longer entertainment, this was survival, and for the first time in their long history of turning chaos into a commodity, the Frosts were facing a scandal they could not control. Courtrooms are built to hold secrets, but in this case the walls could not contain the chaos as the Frost scandal rolled into its next phase, and the whispers turned into testimonies, and the testimonies turned into contradictions. That painted a picture more confusing than clear, because the prosecution was determined to portray Kai as a reckless young man, spoiled by fame and untouchable due to his parents' influence, while the defense leaned heavily on the claim of self-defense, insisting that Kai had no choice but to act in the moment to save his sister from further harm. And yet each witness who took the stand seemed to unravel the story rather than sew it back together. One neighbor claimed they heard a gunshot after the shouting had already died down. Another swore they saw Kai pacing nervously outside before police even arrived, while others insisted that T. Hood had been calm and collected, only to be ambushed by the Frost son. And the tension inside that courtroom was mirrored by the frenzy outside, where bloggers camped on sidewalks, paparazzi shoved cameras in the faces of family members, and fans gathered in droves waving signs demanding justice for T. Hood or freedom for Kai, as if the courthouse itself had become a stage where the city of Atlanta was acting out its own soap opera in real time. The most gripping twist came when an alleged leaked police report surfaced on social media, suggesting that officers had initially listed a second weapon on the scene, only for it to mysteriously disappear from later documentation, fueling conspiracy theories that someone with influence had intervened to protect the Frost name. And if that was not enough, another rumor spread like wildfire, claiming that surveillance footage from a nearby store existed showing T. Hood leaving the Frost property alive and unharmed, only for the footage to vanish without explanation. And though the district attorney dismissed these claims as baseless internet gossip, the damage was already done, because in the court of public opinion, the Frosts were no longer just a family entangled in tragedy. They were symbols of corruption, privilege, and the darker side of fame, where the rules bend for those with money and power. While Rasheeda tried to hold together what was left of her image, but even her most loyal supporters could not deny the silence from her social media presence spoke louder than any carefully worded post, because this was the woman who had built an empire out of oversharing, every fight, every hustle, every curated outfit. And now, in the moment where everyone expected her to address the scandal head-on, she vanished, leaving fans and critics to interpret her absence as guilt, complicity, or even fear. Kirk, on the other hand, could not resist the spotlight. He appeared outside the courthouse surrounded by cameras, insisting that his son was innocent and that the truth would come out. But every time he opened his mouth, he seemed to inflame the backlash further. Critics accused him of arrogance, of dismissing a young man's death as nothing more than another storyline, and the media tore into him with renewed ferocity, painting Him not as a father defending his child but as a man trying to control a narrative. That was no longer his 2 Spinaze weeks dragged on the frost. Scandal spilled into every corner of the entertainment industry, with fellow rappers weighing in on social media, some claiming T Hood's death was part of a larger beef tied to Atlanta's fractured underground music scene, while others distanced themselves, entirely fearful that any association with the Frosts would drag them into the quicksand of controversy. Anonymous sources popped up everywhere, claiming to have insider knowledge, one suggesting that T Hood had been blackmailing the family over a secret deal gone wrong, another insisting he had ties to rivals who wanted to see the Frost empire fall, and though none of these claims were substantiated, they were repeated so often that they began to sound like truth in the ears of fans desperate to make sense of the chaos, and each new theory added another layer to the scandal, making it less about one tragic night and more about the entire ecosystem of fame, greed, and betrayal that Atlanta's entertainment culture seemed to thrive on. What made it all worse was that Kai himself remained largely silent. His lawyers advised him to speak only in court, and the brief glimpses of him in shackles or standing before a judge became the only images the public had to interpret his guilt or innocence, and that silence was filled by everyone else who had something to say. Ex-girlfriends spoke to blogs, describing him as temperamental and unpredictable. Former classmates painted him as either a misunderstood kid trapped in the shadow of famous parents or as a privileged bully who never faced consequences. The Frost name that once opened doors for opportunity was now a curse hanging heavy on Kai's shoulders, and the very fame his parents had worked so hard to cultivate had turned into a magnifying glass, exposing his every flaw. Then came the financial fallout. Boutiques, once promoted by Rasheeda, began to see drops in sales as customers boycotted her. Brand sponsors, who once lined up for collaborations, suddenly pulled back, citing the controversy, and Kirk's ventures struggled as whispers of lawsuits and debt piled on top of the legal costs mounting from the trial. The Frost empire that once seemed untouchable was now collapsing, not because of scripted drama but because reality itself had become too heavy to spin, and in that collapsed, fans saw something both shocking and inevitable: the idea that the glitzy facade of reality television could only shield dysfunction for so long before it exploded into something that could not be controlled. Still, the central question remained: who was telling the truth about that night, and why did the facts keep shifting every time someone opened their mouth? As the trial inched forward, more evidence was promised, yet rarely delivered, and the frustration grew thicker with each passing day. Because justice for T Hood seemed as elusive as freedom for Kai, and the only certainty was that the Frost family had been pulled into a storm far greater than anything reality television could script, a storm that blurred the line between fame and infamy, between performance and punishment, and between survival and collapse. And while some insisted that the truth would eventually rise, others whispered that in Atlanta truth was always the first casualty when power was on the line. The public, meanwhile, had transformed the scandal into a kind of collective sport, with social media threads dissecting courtroom sketches as if they were hieroglyphics, fans creating memes of Rasheeda and Kirk crying outside the courthouse, and online sleuths building entire conspiracy timelines that rivaled detective novels. And yet behind all of the jokes and dramatics was a palpable fear that this case was about more than just one young man's fate, because if Kai was found guilty, it would shatter the illusion of untouchable celebrity families in Atlanta, and if he walked free, it would confirm every suspicion that money and influence made the law a playground for the elite. Either way, the conclusion promised to ignite a firestorm, and no one wanted to miss the explosion. What made the fire burn hotter was the sudden appearance of an anonymous whistleblower who claimed to have been inside the district attorney's office, alleging that certain evidence had been suppressed deliberately to protect influential figures tied not just to the Frost family but to other entertainment heavyweights in Atlanta. The supposed leaks included references to off-the-books meetings, cryptic payment transfers, and even whispered deals to keep surveillance footage out of the public eye, though no one could verify the authenticity of these claims. The very idea that such corruption might run through the veins of the city's justice system pushed the scandal from a family tragedy into the territory of institutional rot, and it was in that space that the media thrived, amplifying every rumor as if it were gospel and fueling debates on whether the Frost case was a trial at all or simply a performance orchestrated to keep the masses entertained while the real truth was buried under endless headliness. Rasheeda herself finally broke her silence with a teary-eyed interview filmed in the safety of her boutique, where she claimed that her family was being persecuted not for what happened on that night, but for who they were and what they represented. She spoke of jealousy, vendettas, and systemic attempts to destroy a black family that had risen to prominence in a city where success was often punished rather than celebrated. Her words struck a chord with some who believed she was telling an uncomfortable truth, yet others dismissed it as damage control, a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative in her favor. And Kirk followed with his own televised statement, where he railed against bloggers and so-called insiders, accusing them of profiting from his family's pain, even as critics pointed out that he himself had built a career monetizing drama and scandal in his own household, and the hypocrisy of his outrage became yet another talking point in an already overflowing sea of discourse. When the jury finally returned with a verdict, the silence was deafening as reporters scrambled to capture the moment that would either destroy or vindicate the Frost family, and though the words spoken by the foreman echoed in that room, the reaction outside was immediate and explosive, because no matter what side one fell on, the decision became fuel for outrage. Those who felt justice had been served roared with relief. Those who believed corruption had triumphed wailed with fury, and the streets of Atlanta erupted into chaos as fireworks, gunshots, and protests collided into a cacophony of sound that seemed to mirror the madness of the entire trial. The Frost family huddled together under the glare of flashing cameras, and the look on Rasheeda's face was not one of victory or defeat, but of someone who realized that no matter the outcome, their lives had been irreversibly altered. In the aftermath, whispers of federal investigations into evidence tampering and corruption began to circulate, casting a shadow that ensured the scandal would not die quietly. Sponsors who had once abandoned Rasheeda now hesitated to return, unsure if the Frost brand could ever be scrubbed clean. Kirk reportedly faced mounting debts as business deals collapsed, and lawsuits stacked against him, while Kai's own future remained uncertain even after the trial, because though the court had spoken, the court of public opinion had already rendered a harsher sentence, one that would follow him like a shadow for the rest of his life. And in living rooms across America, viewers debated endlessly about whether this was justice or tragedy, or simply the natural consequence of a family that had turned their private lives into public currency for too long, until the very performance they profited from consumed them. Yet the most haunting aspect of the entire saga was the realization that the truth might never be fully known, because every piece of evidence, every testimony, every rumor seemed to contradict another, until the line between fact and fabrication dissolved completely, leaving only a story that would be retold, twisted, reshaped, and exaggerated for years to come. A story that had transformed a family, a city, and perhaps even a culture into characters of a drama that none of them could control anymore. And as the lights dimmed on the courthouse and the reporters packed up their gear and the hashtags slowly faded from trending lists, the legacy of the Frost scandal lingered like smoke in the air, a reminder that fame can buy attention, influence can bend narratives, but neither can silence the chaos once it has been unleashed. And in that chaos, the Frost name would forever be etched, not as a symbol of hustle or glamour, but as the cautionary tale of what happens when the performance never ends, and the stage lights burn too bright for anyone to survive. If you have followed this entire journey, then you already know this is not just another story of fame meeting scandal. It is a reminder of how fragile reputation is, how quickly power shifts, and how the truth can be buried beneath noise and spectacle. The Frost case has stirred emotions, divided opinions, and exposed the hidden cracks in a system we all thought we understood, and now it is up to you, the viewer, to decide what this means, not just for one family but for the culture that created them. If this story made you think, if it made you question, if it made you feel even for a moment, then don't let the conversation die. Here, share your thoughts, speak your truth, and challenge the narrative, because your voice is what gives stories like this their power. And if you want to keep unraveling scandals that shake the industry, if you want to dive deeper into the secrets, the rumors, and the truths that others are afraid to confront, then stay with us. This is just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and be ready, because the next story might be even bigger and you will not want to miss it.